been dealing with for the past couple of years, honestly, on the other side of obesity, dealing with what it means for me to be a woman. And I want to talk about it because I think it really plays a heavy role in my relationship with men and how I engage when I'm flirting or, you know, desiring a certain guy. And that is like my concept of like me being a woman, someone who's fragile, someone who's vulnerable. I think growing up, my sister was smaller than I was, even though I was older. And so there would be things that my mom would not allow my sister to do, but that she would allow me to do. You know, things that really ate away at my sense of being fragile and being vulnerable. For example, my sister was not allowed to take the public bus, to take public transportation, because my mom was concerned about her safety, her well-being, whether or not a man would attack her and she would be able to, you know, fend for herself. Well, that wasn't the case for me. You know, it was, and I love my mom, and my mom is a great mom, and, you know, I think she did the best that she could, you know, but there were things that I realized kind of got deeply seated, deeply rooted inside of me that are still things that I struggle with today. And that was in relation to my, like I said, my vulnerability, my fragility, me being someone that was susceptible to abuse or to sexual abuse. It was almost like that wasn't going to be the case, Liana, because you're big. You can take care of yourself. You can handle it. And I think over the years that kind of created this sense in me that I wasn't like other women. I wasn't, my fatness made me not a woman. My fatness made me not vulnerable, made me not fragile, made me not, I can't think of the word I'm trying to use, but you guys get what I'm saying. And, you know, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think it definitely kind of made me feel like I wasn't a woman. And not that I know what it's like to be a man, but it made me feel like if I fit anywhere, it was more on the masculine side in that sense, you know. So it's interesting because I went on a date with a guy the other day, and you know, we were walking, and he, you know, he kind of asked me like to stand on the inside of the street. He wanted to stand on the outside, and, you know, and it's really, I'm not alert and aware to those type of things, you know, and I'm not used to being cared for. I'm not used to being looked after in that way. Even in my relationship, like I'm used to being the caregiver. I'm used to being the one who's looking out for everybody else. I'm used to being the strong one. But here I am on the other side of obesity, and I'm trying to date, and I'm trying to be in a relationship, and I'm trying to be the woman. You know, it's interesting because the Bible, you know, talks about the woman being the weaker vessel, and I don't think that is like a jab at women or to anything that, you know, is dealing with our value. I think that's speaking of the fact that God created men to be our protectors. God created men to look out for us. And think about it, you know, even physically, our statures, you know, like for the most part, you know, men are stronger. Men have more testosterone. Their body is able to build muscle strength in a way, you know, that women, we were not, you know. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that's just the reality of how God created us. And so you think about me, Liana, almost 400 pounds, 350 something pounds, you know, before I started my weight loss journey. And I did not necessarily fit into that I don't know if you want to call it category, or that reality, or that experience that a lot of women did, at least the women in my world. And so, you know, it kind of ate away for me, I felt like, at the ability to feel cared for, to feel like, quote unquote, the weaker vessel, to experience care in that way. And so here I am, 30 years old, not obese anymore, trying to date, and it's a shift in my mind. Though I desire to be looked after, I desire to be cared for, I desire to be protected, I desire to have a man in my life in that way, psychologically is definitely an adjustment for me. Life on the other side of obesity is definitely really causing me to be uncomfortable in new ways as I seek to be in a new state, in a new mind, in a new type of relationship. Yeah, so it's really about me coming to terms with who I am, with what I want, with not allowing my my old story to still be the story that has the main voice. I talked in my last video about even the fact that I felt like I was lied to, that when I first started losing a lot of weight, women were telling me how the men are going to start flocking to me, and that wasn't my case. And for so long I had believed that I did not date, I didn't have men in my life because I was overweight. And so it's been this journey of challenging the ideas of what have been the past narratives and the stories that I have allowed to kind of dictate how I navigate life. Because here I am, I'm 30 years old, men are not necessarily flocking to me now either, and I'm not, well, not that I'm 30, but that I'm not overweight, I'm not obese. And then the other thing is, when the men do enter my life, you know, how am I handling them, and how am I handling myself in relationship to them? Because of, once again, the narratives that I have lived from. So yeah, it's really a journey. I don't necessarily have answers per se. I just have this plight right now. You know, what does it mean for me to be a sexual being? What does it mean for me to be a woman? What does it mean for me to do all of that in relationship to my relationship with God and my relationship with Christ? It's not as easy as some may think, or maybe people don't think it's easy at all, but it's definitely difficult. I have a lot of opinions about sex and sexuality that may not, you know, not really conclusions, but really just thoughts, you know, and frustrations even of how I feel like the church has mishandled it and how they could have done better with it. And, you know, kind of not shaming people as much, and not making sex such a dirty topic. You know, because it's really interesting that you're supposed to see this bad, and one day you're supposed to wake up and call it good. I think we have mishandled how we deal with sex and desire. And here I am, you know, even though I am technically, I guess by most people's standards or definition of virgin, if you define virginity as the lack of penetration, I don't necessarily find some pride in it per se, because, you know, for me, I'm not speaking for other people, but for me, the temptation to have sex wasn't as prevalent because I was not comfortable with my own body. And so it was not like I was fighting off this temptation to have sex because I was not desiring to share my body with someone else. It was hard enough for me to be comfortable with my body with myself, let alone give somebody else access to touch. You know, I mean, I've had experiences, but even the experiences that I had felt very shameful and felt very like hidden, you know, and it wasn't something that felt liberating or free or beautiful. So I think for me, here I am, you know, more comfortable with my own skin, more comfortable with my own body, less harsh about my desires. I think the struggle is more real now for me than it has ever been. And so even though I'm 30 years old and I'm still a virgin, I don't necessarily feel like I'm a 30-year-old virgin in the sense of I've been holding out for 30 years or I've been holding out for 15 years or whatever. I feel like, if anything, more like the past 3 or 4 years of my life. And so I think the struggle that a lot of my peers may have had since they were 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, I'm dealing with at 30 years old. And I can relate more. I have more compassion and understanding for the journey because it's more of a reality and a presence right now for me than it ever has been. So, you know, I think that I can relate to teenagers and young adults in a way now that I never could in my past, because in my past, it wasn't really my struggle. You know, I struggled with shame, I struggled with obesity, I struggled with a lack of value, I've struggled with not feeling like a woman, I've struggled with not feeling feminine enough, I've struggled with not feeling beautiful enough, I've struggled with feeling, you know, worthless and like a piece of trash. But I did not necessarily struggle with resisting sex. Though I have had an interesting experience with sex in the sense of, like, I've struggled with pornography, I've struggled with, you know, those type of things, and I don't know how much of that is rooted in, you know, the church not having a positive view on sex. I think if the church had a more positive view on sex and talked about sexuality more, less people like myself and less people would struggle with sex in the context of shameful acts, you know, whether that is finding yourself stuck in the throes of pornography, or masturbation, which is another conversation. I'm gonna do another video on, let's talk about masturbation, and you know, what is that all about. And you know, I have my own journey personally with it, and really wrestling with it, and dealing with it in the context of relationship with God, in context with relationship with my own body, in the context of not trying to have sex, you know. On this side, you know, my journey, I didn't start dealing with masturbation until later on in life, but that also came with the process of me being comfortable with my own body, you know. So yeah, this is a lot. I'm saying a lot in this one video, but you know, I want to talk about this stuff. I really want us to kind of dive in and really unpack our frameworks, our worldviews, how we see life, how we see sex, how we see Christianity, how we see God's expectation of us. And even once knowing what we believe his expectation may be, how do we then navigate this journey without feeling dirty and shameful all the time, or like we're under some like oppressive rule? But that, you know, if anything, the Bible talks about being in a liberated and a free state in Christ. And so what does that look like in relation to us as human beings that he created with a sexual desire and a sex drive? Yeah, that was a lot. Y'all almost got me to work. All right, I'll check y'all later.